Good morning. This week, House Republicans are honoring our brave men and women in blue for National Police Week. Throughout my district in upstate New York and the North Country, law enforcement officials sacrifice their lives to keep our communities safe. 365 days a year, 24/7. House Republicans are proudly the party of law and order, and we proudly back the blue. In fact, many of our colleagues in the House Republican Conference have previously served in law enforcement, and yesterday they joined us at our press conference to highlight the unwavering support for the men and women in blue in this new House Republican majority. While violent criminals are being put back on the streets because of Democrats' soft-on-crime policies and the defund the police movement, House Republicans are taking action to defend our communities and back the blue with a package of bills this week. Today, Speaker McCarthy will meet with President Joe Biden, Senator Chuck Schumer, and Senator Mitch McConnell at the White House regarding the debt ceiling. Here are the facts. For over 100 days, Joe Biden has refused to offer a sensible solution to avoid defaulting on our debt. Fact 2. Every single House Democrat voted against raising the debt ceiling. Number 3. House Republicans are the only ones who have passed a reasonable solution to reining in the reckless spending in this country and reasonably raising the debt ceiling. As we have done every single week, today the conference is proud to highlight one of our newly elected freshmen, Mike Lawler, my fellow New Yorker, who flipped a district and is just a rising star in our conference. Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning. As we commemorate National Police Week, let us honor our brave men and women in blue who steadfastly dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our communities. This week is a solemn reminder that our peace and security are often maintained at great personal risk to these brave individuals. Last week, I was proud to join my colleagues, including Chairwoman Stefanik, at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, where I placed a wreath by the names of Sergeant Edward O'Grady and Police Officer Waverly Brown, who lost their lives protecting Rockland County during the Brinks robbery in 1981. We will never forget their sacrifice. House Republicans this week will honor our brave men and women by passing a number of bills, including H.R. 2494, the Police Act. This legislation will maintain the dignity and safety of all our officers by providing serious consequences to those who harm them. Under the Act, non-citizens found guilty of assaulting a police officer would be eligible for deportation. We have seen in New York in particular a rapid rise in crime. And I've talked about this for a very long time, unfortunately, with policies that have been enacted at the state and city level, which have jeopardized public safety, put our law enforcement officers at risk, and created a crisis between the disastrous cashless bail law, the non-enforcement of petty crimes, parole for unrepentant cop killers and child rapists, the disbandment of the anti-crime unit, which primary responsibility is getting illegal guns off the streets. New York City has become a haven for criminals, and it needs to stop. And it is why we have strongly supported here in the Republican Conference the men and women in blue, and will continue to do so at every level to try and stem the tide of crime and keep our streets safe for our residents. One other thing I want to highlight, just this past weekend we saw in New York, homeless veterans being displaced to house migrants in the town of Newburgh at the behest of the city of New York and Mayor Eric Adams. Their failed sanctuary city policies have created a migrant and humanitarian crisis, and the failure of the Biden administration to secure our southern border has created a calamity across our country. Over 60,000 migrants have been taken into New York City since last year. New York City is busting at the seams. They cannot handle it. And so Mayor Adams is doing the very thing he decried that southern governors were doing by shifting migrants up to New York City. He is now looking to shift migrants into communities like mine and municipalities all across New York State because they do not have enough housing in the city. The problem is they are failing to coordinate, communicate, and cooperate with municipal officials. And as a result, Nearly 20 veterans were displaced, homeless veterans, citizens, people who served our communities, our state, our country, displaced in favor of homeless migrants. This is totally unacceptable and cannot stand. Mayor Adams owes an apology to these veterans, and he needs to cease and desist from shifting the responsibility of the migrants and his sanctuary city policies, which have long failed, onto municipalities such as mine. With that, I am proud to introduce our great Majority Whip, Tom Emmer.
Last week, Kevin McCarthy and House Republicans aced what we're calling our 7th first big test. As some of you have reported over the last few months, this is the next first big test. We did the 7th first big test last week by passing the strongest border security bill ever to hit the floor of the House of Representatives. What our members did, what our members and Speaker McCarthy did was historic. The House had not passed a comprehensive border bill since 1996, but our majority once again rallied together against all odds to deliver for the American people. Thanks to Joe Biden and the Democrats' malfeasance at the border, more than 10,000 migrants crossed the border illegally in a single day. Migrant children are being abused and exploited, with 85,000 children completely unaccounted for. And the Department of Public Safety has seized more than 300 million lethal doses of fentanyl. That's enough to kill every man, woman, and child in the United States. To call this anything but a crisis is either an outright lie or blatant incompetence. House Republicans have provided the blueprint to secure our border and get Biden's inhumane crisis under control. The blood is on the Biden administration's hands if they continue to bury their heads in the sand while our communities get overrun by their open border policies. This border crisis did not come about haphazardly. It happened by design when President Biden fired off a laundry list of executive orders on day one of his presidency to halt construction of the border wall and roll back Trump-era immigration policies that were working. Chuck Schumer and the Biden White House need to pass the Secure the Border Act immediately or be ready to be held accountable for failing to address this crisis head on. And with that, again, in honor of National Police Week, someone that is very familiar with the importance of the men and women in blue, our leader, Steve Scalise.
Well, thank you, Whip. And as we all celebrate National Police Week, we're bringing a number of bills to the floor this week to back our men and women in law enforcement who keep our community safe, who keep us safe. I know that every day. I pay tribute to them every day. I pray for our men and women in law enforcement that they're able not only to do their job safely, but able to return home to their families safely each evening. Unfortunately, not all do. Last night we had a piece of legislation on the floor to pay tribute to the more than 200 law enforcement officers who were killed in the line of duty last year. And again, the first step of a number of pieces of legislation. But it is alarming that multiple Democrats voted against that piece of legislation to pay tribute to law enforcement officers who died in the line of duty. Why the Democratic Party has moved more and more towards this anti-cop, defund the police movement is perplexing. I think most Americans have been shocked by the way that they've embraced this radical idea. But we're going to continue to stand up for those men and women in law enforcement who keep our communities safe. And I embrace and hope all others embrace the great work that they do and reward them and thank them for what they do. Anybody who's watching, if you see a cop, thank those men and women in uniform for what they do to keep our community safe. We also are very alarmed by this dramatically increased flow of people coming across our border illegally. We warned this was going to happen. We were encouraging the Biden administration for over a year and a half to get control of the open border. All we've gotten is denial and lies from the administration. Just last week, the Secretary of Homeland Security actually said the border's not open. The same day that over 13,000 people came across our border illegally. If that is not an open border to Secretary Mayorkas, I would hate to hear the answer of what he considers an open border. You saw the same thing from other people in the Biden administration. They think if they just ignore this problem, mislead the public about this problem, that it'll go away. It's not going away. It's only getting worse. One of the bills that we're bringing to the floor this week by Congressman Garbarino says that if somebody attacks a law enforcement officer who is here illegally, that would be a deportable offense. We just saw the disgrace, as Mike Lawler talked about, that the Biden administration actually prioritized people that are here illegally over military veterans. I did not hear a peep from anybody in the Biden administration when those reports started coming out and then were confirmed that in some case American taxpayer dollars were used to kick veterans out of a hotel to replace them with people here illegally. If Americans knew their tax dollars were going to that, and this president says he can't find any savings, I'll tell you one of the first areas of savings we should find is say no more dollars will be used to kick homeless veterans out of a hotel to replace them with people here illegally. People are seeing this. People are angered by it. They watched multiple people on the terrorist watch list get caught last week coming across our border illegally. Those are just the ones we caught. How many others have come across who are on the terrorist watch list? People coming to do us harm, people bringing drugs like fentanyl. Today, again, another 300 young people will die from fentanyl and other drug overdoses because of the illegal drugs coming over our open southern border. This has to end. We're going to continue, as we did last week, to take action to secure America's border. It's long past time the president join us in doing this. We just yesterday saw the Durham Report. There were a number of alarming items that were included in that report. I know Chairman Jordan is going to continue to have more oversight on this, but think about this quote. Quote from the Durham Report: "The FBI failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law." They actually identified an FBI agent who knowingly made misrepresentations to the FISA court to spy on an American citizen. Where's the accountability for this? Who is being held accountable? These are the questions that we're going to continue to ask. And then finally, as the debt ceiling conversations, I'm not even sure if their negotiations continue. The House, as has been pointed out many times, is the only body that's actually acted to address the debt ceiling. We took action to address not only the debt ceiling, but the spending problem that got us here in the first place. We have a number of items in that package that show the President, the Senate, how we can fix the problem that keeps bringing us to this brink where the credit card of the nation gets maxed out and there's potential default that President Biden flirts with because he went into hiding for about 100 days refusing to negotiate. In that meeting today, the president needs to come with very specific ideas. If he doesn't support our bill, he should just come and say, you know what, the House actually came together and passed a bill to solve the problem, and he supports that bill. The Senate should take action too, which they failed to do. They're really good to criticize other people. I've yet to see them take action. It's time for all the talk to end and actual ideas, like we did, pass, be put on the table by the president. With that, be happy to take some questions. Chad. Well, I think most of our members, and I don't know of any of them who have said that the Secretary doesn't determine what the date is based on the data that's coming in. The question that we've raised is, why are they waiting till the midnight hour? Why is the president's known about this date too? I'm sure Janet Yellen probably gives the president a lot of input, maybe even before she gives us input on what that X date might be. But why did the president wait until we're only days away from that X date? when he could have been negotiating back in February and March when Speaker McCarthy was reaching out to the president saying, let's have follow-up discussions after their first meeting in February. Why did he wait 100 days? Why are we waiting and now we're up to the midnight hour? So we know the date is there, but the president's known the date's there too. That's why we acted weeks ago.
But does that suggest to you that maybe that isn't the real date, that they actually think that there's more time there? I mean, you said they're bringing it right up to the deadline.
Well, we know that the date is not an exact number. It might be a couple of days before, a couple of days after. That's out of our control. But at the end of the day, we've all known it's going to be around this time. They've been saying for months it's going to be around June. As it's gotten closer to June, they're saying their data shows it's pretty narrowed in on that early June date, maybe June 1st. But at the end of the day, if the administration has known what they've been telling us, why did they wait to start negotiating for over 100 days? And why is President Biden still to this day yet to put an idea on the table, short of saying just give him another blank check, which even the Senate can't pass?
Given the nature of negotiations between Speaker McCarthy and President Biden, you're probably going to end up with a product that some people on the right aren't going to like very much, some people on the left aren't going to like very much. To borrow Mr. Emmer's sort of structure here, how confident are you could pass your eighth big test and move
Eighth first test. That's the key he talked about.
How confident are you could move something like that with a bipartisan coalition on the floor at the midnight hour?
I'm a little more optimistic than you. I think the more, maybe the president hasn't read the full proposal yet, and if you listen to Chuck Schumer, he mustn't have read it yet because there are a lot of things in there that he hasn't acknowledged in the bill we passed. So if they took the bill that we passed, not only would it address the debt ceiling, which it does, but it would also help grow the economy, create more jobs, address the spending problem that's driving inflation, reclaiming unspent COVID money that even the president now himself is saying is a problem. Put basic work requirements in place for people who are able-bodied adults who are not even looking for work. That's something that Joe Biden as a senator actually voted for. So again, these are all ideas that have broad appeal not only amongst the public, but some of these are things that Joe Biden himself voted for. Why he's opposing it now, maybe he just hasn't looked at the whole thing. So hopefully when he looks at it, he'll realize we passed a bill. I'm not going to keep negotiating. We had a lot of negotiation in the House. We didn't have any Democrats that wanted to join us, but we had that door open, and at the end of the day, we passed a bill. It's time for other people in this town to come up with an idea of their own if they don't like our idea.
Are you gaming at how to make this work? You're going to have to pass another bill. I'm reasonably confident it won't be the House-passed bill that is the final product.
There's a chance of that. So, we will be ready for that if the negotiations yield something. But the negotiations have to actually yield ideas. If the president has something he's willing to put on the table, it's time now. There's no, well, let's have another meeting a week from now. And the president has been running out the clock for months. And he wants to get to the midnight hour. He wants to create a debt crisis that's irresponsible. What Speaker McCarthy and all of us have said is that we shouldn't run the clock to midnight. That's why we acted weeks in advance. So today's a meeting. I hope the president's been doing his homework. I hope he's been coming up with other ideas, or he's going to support our idea. Those should be the only two choices. If the president goes into that meeting today and gives more empty rhetoric like he has in the past meetings, that will show you he's not serious. I hope he's serious because we've been serious for a long time.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Congressman Waller, I know you signed on to the letter calling on the Senate to stay in session next week, and I just wonder, for the other leaders, do you share that view? Do you think the Senate should stay in session, and do you think President Biden should not go on this trip tomorrow?
Well, the American people want an American president who's focused on American problems. And we've got a serious crisis on a number of fronts in America. It's not just a debt crisis. There's a border crisis. There's an inflation crisis. There's a confidence crisis in the Biden administration. And so I would hope that he focuses on all that, and hopefully he can do both. Hopefully he resolves the debt crisis issue today. You would think if he knows he's leaving the country, then finish these talks before he leaves. He can do that. I would encourage him strongly to do that. So, we took action. We addressed the problem in the House. I want to see some other people in Washington take it as seriously. The Senate needs to start doing their work as well. We did our work. The Senate needs to.
Basil Gentleman next are. Some of your Democratic colleagues are showcasing support later today in front of the Supreme Court, calling for an increase the number of seats on the Supreme Court, increasing by 4. Just want to get your thoughts on that and if anybody else can.
Packing the Supreme Court is a stale idea. that was thrown out decades ago by people who just want to impose their own ideology and turn the court into a political circus. Most Americans don't want that. We passed a bill that does all of those things and a lot more. A lot of really good things. And again, the economic growth shouldn't be lost in this. You know, clearly we addressed the spending problem. We re-baseline and go back to pre-COVID levels of spending from just a few months ago. But we also included growth provisions, the Lower Energy Costs Act, the RAINS Act, things that will actually help create jobs and reduce inflation. Inflation is a major tax on low-income families that is crushing hard-working Americans right now. And a lot of it's driven by President Biden's spending the last 2 years. So part of what we put in our bill that addressed the debt ceiling helps lower inflation so those families can get a break who really want it. I hope the president does it too. Last question. I'll do last question here. Well, what you've seen from a number of colleagues, and frankly it's bolstered by the Durham Report, is that there are some agents at the FBI who acted outside the lines. Again, I will read a quote from the Durham Report. These aren't House Republicans. This is the Durham Report conducted from within law enforcement. The FBI, quote, the FBI failed to uphold their mission of strict fidelity to the law. They also point out that an FBI agent knowingly made misrepresentations to the FISA court. It's a violation of law. Who's being held accountable? And so the concerns are, you know, we support men and women in law enforcement. Nobody supports dirty cops. And if there's dirty cops, they need to be rooted out. And we want to start seeing that level of accountability. And the Durham Report shows you a roadmap of where some of that accountability needs to be administered. They need to do their job cleaning house as well. Thank you.